A black motorcade of cars slowly approached a small building on the outskirts of the city. A crowd had already gathered on the street: journalists, photographers, random passers-by who had heard that Elon Musk himself would be coming to this orphanage. Despite all the successes, billion-dollar fortunes, and bold ideas, this visit was not just a charity event. He understood that for children who live without parents, it is important not only to receive new toys, clothes, or gadgets. They need something more. They need inspiration. When the car doors opened, Musk stepped out, accompanied by several of his company's employees. He was dressed simply: jeans, a black t-shirt, a jacket. He did not want his appearance to look like a standard PR stunt. But the paparazzi thought differently. The flashes of cameras immediately blinded him. Journalists tried to get closer, shouting questions. "Mr. Musk, why did you decide to visit this orphanage? Are you planning to create a fund to help children? Is it true that this is part of your new project?" Musk did not respond. He simply smiled and raised his hand slightly, indicating to the guards that he had everything under control. He didn't want this moment to turn into a show. He didn't come for the headlines, but for the children waiting for him inside. When he entered the building, he was met by the director of the orphanage, Mrs. Davis, an elderly woman with kind eyes. "Mr. Musk, thank you for taking the time to meet us. The children are very happy." Elon nodded, looking at the group of children who were shy to come closer. Some held hands, some hid behind the backs of their elders. But there was curiosity in their eyes. "Hey guys," he said, stepping forward. "How are you doing?" Some of the children nodded, some muttered, "Okay," but most remained silent. They found it hard to believe that standing in front of them was the same person they had heard about on TV, read about in the news, and seen in YouTube videos. But Musk knew how to break the ice. He turned to the assistants who were holding large boxes of gifts. "I heard that you are big fans of toys here. Is it true?" Smiles flashed across the children's faces. "Yes!" exclaimed one of the younger ones. "Then I have something for you." Distribution of gifts: joy in the eyes of children. The guards and staff of the orphanage began to open the boxes. Inside were colorful toys, soft toys, construction sets, radio-controlled cars, dolls, and board games. The children could not contain their emotions. They rushed to the boxes, examining the gifts, trying them in their hands. "Can I take it?" asked a boy of about 8 years old hopefully. "Of course you can. They're yours now." Musk smiled. His gaze slid over the children, watching how genuinely happy they were. For them, it was more than just a gift. It was a moment of happiness. But not all the children rushed to the toys. In the corner stood a little girl, about 6 years old, with long blonde hair and blue eyes. She looked closely at Elon, but did not approach. Musk noticed her and, squatting down, smiled. "Hello? You didn't like the toys?" The girl was a little embarrassed, but shook her head. "No, they are beautiful. I just wanted to ask you something else." He was surprised. "Well, ask away." The girl took a deep breath and said quietly, "Did you have a happy childhood?" Silence. The children froze. Even the adult staff at the orphanage looked surprised. Nobody expected such a question. Elon also fell silent for a second. Because it wasn't just a question. It was a question he had asked himself many times. He looked at the girl and realized that he couldn't answer with a standard phrase. He can't just say yes or no. These children deserve the truth. The real gift is a story, not toys. Musk straightened up, looked into the girl's eyes and smiled softly. "You know, I never thought about it like that. But since you asked, I'll tell you." He turned to the other children. "Do you want to hear the story of my childhood?" Everyone nodded. Someone even sat down on the floor, ready to listen. The journalists, who at first simply filmed the distribution of gifts, now almost forgot about their cameras. Everyone felt that this moment was more important than just charity. Elon took a deep breath. He didn't often talk about his past. But now, looking into the eyes of children who lived without parents, faced difficulties and dreamed of the future, he realized They need to hear that even the most difficult childhood years are not a death sentence. And he began to speak. I was born in a very distant country, South Africa. It was not an easy place to live. My father was a strict man, and I had to deal with cruelty at school. I was not strong, I did not know how to fight. I was an ordinary boy who loved books, computers, and dreamed of flying into space one day. The children listened with bated breath. There was silence in the hall. A little girl with blue eyes stood in front of Elon Musk, waiting for an answer. Did you have a happy childhood? This question was so unexpected that even the adults froze. It seemed that the children were too busy with the gifts, noisily discussing new toys, but after this question even the youngest looked at Elon with anticipation. He didn't answer right away. He could have simply smiled and said something neutral, like, "Of course I was happy, because I had family and friends." But that would be a lie. Elon Musk was not a man who told people only what they wanted to hear. He took a deep breath, crouched down in front of the girl so that they were on the same level, and asked softly, "What is your name?" "May," the girl answered quietly. "May. You asked a very good question. And you know, I think I'll tell you the truth." She nodded, her eyes watching him carefully. The other children began to come closer, sit on the floor, some leaned against the wall, and some held a toy in their hands, forgetting about it. Elon looked at them. They were just like him as a child. Only he was alone then. I was born in South Africa, in the city of Pretoria. It was a difficult city, and the country was difficult. There was a lot of poverty, crime, and injustice. As a child, I did not always feel safe. The children looked at him with wide eyes. South Africa seemed to them a distant, almost imaginary place. But for Elon, that was his past. I had a strict father. He believed that children should be tough, and rarely showed warm emotions. I grew up feeling that I couldn't share my experiences, that I had to cope on my own. May frowned. Were you lonely? Elon thought for a second and then answered honestly. Yes. Very much. Some of the children exchanged glances. They expected the billionaire to talk about a happy childhood full of toys and travel. But it turned out that he also knew what loneliness was. It wasn't easy at school either. I wasn't the most athletic boy. I didn't fight. I didn't play football like others. I liked reading and learning programming more. Have you read a lot? Asked one of the boys. Elon nodded. Yes. Sometimes I read for 10 hours a day. Books were my best friends. They showed me a world that was much bigger than the reality I lived in. Did you have friends at school? May asked again. Elon smiled a little, but his gaze remained serious. No. In elementary school, I had a very difficult time. I was often teased, sometimes beaten. I was a child who talked too much about space and computers, and not about fights and football. The children looked at him in surprise. How can you tease Elon Musk? How can you not want to be friends with him? But he continued. Once, when I was about 12 years old, some older boys beat me up so badly that I had to stay in the hospital for several days. After that, I realized that I had to learn to defend myself. Some of the children frowned. They didn't expect him to go through such trials. Didn't your teachers help? Asked the older girl. Elon shook his head. At that time, no one talked about bullying the way they do now. Teachers usually didn't intervene. I had to learn to deal with it myself. And how did you cope? Elon thought about it. I found what I was good at. I delved into math, programming, electronics. I became interested in how computers work. And when you really like something, you stop noticing everything else. When I was 12, I wrote my first computer game. It was a simple space shooter. I sold it for $500. The children's eyes lit up. You sold the game when you were 12? Elon smiled. Yes. It was the first proof that I could make money from my ideas. And what did you do with the money? I bought myself a better computer. The children laughed. But there was admiration in that laughter. That's when I realized I didn't have to be like everyone else. I didn't have to be a cool guy to be successful. I just had to be myself. The children's reaction is an unexpected turn. After these words, silence reigned. The children didn't just listen to his story. They recognized themselves in her. Someone else has also faced loneliness. Some were afraid that their dreams would never come true. But before them stood a man who was just like them, but did not give up. You say it was hard for you, but now you have everything you could ever dream of, May said. How did that happen? Ilon looked at her and smiled softly. Because I never gave up. Overcoming fear is the main lesson. I could have stopped when I was getting beat up at school. I could have given up when I had no friends. I could have decided that I would never amount to anything great. He paused, his voice quiet but confident. But I knew that if I kept moving forward, one day I would get where I wanted to go. May listened attentively. But weren't you ever scared? Ilon nodded. Of course there was. Fear is normal. But you know what I realized? The scariest thing is not losing. The scariest thing is never trying. These words struck right to the heart. The children looked at him with wide eyes. They realized that this man is not just a billionaire, not just a genius. He is a man who has gone through difficulties and overcome them. And maybe they can too. Musk looked at each child and then said, You can achieve anything you want. The main thing is to never give up. And then something happened that he didn't expect. May walked up to him, hugged him, and whispered, Thank you, Mr. Musk. Now I know I can do it. At that moment, Ilon realized that today he had given the children more than just toys. He gave them faith in themselves. Elon Musk looked at the children gathered around him. There was more than just interest in their eyes. They were drinking in his every word, as if they were searching for answers to their own questions. He felt that their stories were similar. Loneliness, fear, uncertainty, dreams that seem impossible. But he knew that it was dreams that made a person stronger. I told you I wanted to leave South Africa. But I didn't tell you how hard it was. My father did not support me, and I had no money for the trip. The only chance to leave was to go to university abroad. The children looked at him in surprise. Did you think you'd get a scholarship? One of the boys asked. Elon shook his head. No. I knew I would have to work. But first I needed to get to a country where I could start building my future. He looked at the boys and added with a slight smile. And I found a way. My mother was Canadian, and that gave me a chance to get citizenship. But in order to move, I first had to find money for a ticket. I started working various part-time jobs, saving every penny. What was your first job? Asked the boy with dark curls. I cleaned boilers at the factory. The children looked at each other. You? Yes. But weren't you a genius? Elon smiled. A genius is not someone who is smart from birth. A genius is someone who continues to work even when things are difficult. And how long did you work there? Several months. It was dirty, hard work. I was in oily clothes. The stench was terrible. But I knew this was my ticket to a new life. He paused and added, Sometimes you have to do what you don't like for the sake of what you really want. The children were silent. Some looked at their hands, others thoughtfully played with the edge of their t-shirts. They understood. They knew what it meant to overcome difficulties. The American dream, but at what cost? When I finally moved to Canada, I had to work even harder. I took several jobs, sometimes sleeping on the floor because I didn't have money for a bed. But I was happy. Happy? May was surprised. Yes. Because I knew it was temporary. He looked at the children and continued. If you know that everything is moving towards your goal, difficulties stop being scary. They become steps that you use to climb higher. But do you know what's the hardest thing on the path to a dream? The children looked at him carefully. Defeats. Did you lose? The boy in the sweatshirt asked quietly. Oh, and how? He chuckled as he recalled his early failures. I tried to start a company called Zit2. I had to sleep in the office, eat only hot dogs, and live like that for months. But I believed. And you know what happened? Have you failed? The girl asked uncertainly. No. I sold the company for $300 million. The children gasped. But that was just the beginning. You became a millionaire. Isn't that a success? Elon nodded. It was a success, but not the one I dreamed of. I didn't just want to make money. I wanted to change the world. The fall of SpaceX, and how it got back up. After that, I started working on SpaceX. I wanted to send rockets into space, make them reusable, but. He was silent for a second. The first 3 launches failed. What do you mean, failed? They exploded. The children's eyes widened. And what did you do? I was on the verge of bankruptcy. I only had enough money for one last attempt. If it failed, everything I had worked for would be lost. He looked into their faces and said, And you know what? What? The children asked in chorus. The 4th rocket has taken off. The children began to applaud. Some smiled, some shook their heads, some even tried to imagine what they would do in Musk's place. The main lesson is to never give up. I'm not telling you this to brag. I want you to understand one thing. He looked around the audience. Never give up. He looked straight into May's eyes. You may be criticized. You may be laughed at. You may fail. But if you keep moving forward, one day you will find yourself where you have always dreamed of being. The children were silent. Not because they had nothing to say. Because they understood. Every word Musk said resonated with their own lives, their fears and their dreams. Elon exhaled. Now he knew why he was here. This was not just a charity visit. He didn't just hand out toys and clothes. He gave these children something that no amount of money could buy. Hope. Elon Musk finished his story. There was complete silence in the room. The children, who an hour ago had simply been waiting for gifts, now looked at him with almost reverent respect. This was not just a meeting with a billionaire, not just another charity event. It was a moment they would remember for the rest of their lives. Children's reactions knew questions. May, the same girl who asked Musk about his childhood, was the first to break the silence. Mr. Musk, what would have happened if the 4th rocket had also exploded? Elon smiled. Good question. He paused, looking around the audience. You know, sometimes I asked myself that question. But deep down I always knew, if it hadn't taken off, I would have tried again. The children looked at each other. But what if you had no money left? Asked one of the boys. I would find a way. I would start from scratch again. Because when you know what you want, no obstacles can stop you. Some of the children nodded. How can I understand what you want? The older girl asked timidly. Elon leaned a little closer. Listen to your heart. She frowned. How so? When you do something, have you ever felt that time flies by? That you can do it for hours and not get tired? The girl thought for a moment, then nodded. This is your passion. Your dream. She opened her eyes wide. And if parents say it doesn't matter? Musk looked her straight in the eyes. They don't know your future. Only you know. Awareness. Every child felt important. After these words, the children froze. Elon saw something change in their eyes. They no longer looked at him as a distant celebrity. Now they looked at him as a man who had once been just like them. Who also doubted. Who was also afraid. But who did not give up. And now before them was not just a legend. Before them stood a living example of how dreams can come true. An unexpected moment. Children's gratitude. May suddenly stood up from her seat and walked over to Elon. She handed him a small cloth doll. This is for you. Musk took the doll in surprise. What is this? This is my talisman. It brings good luck. Since you had such a hard time, I want you to never be afraid again. Elon was speechless for a second. It was unexpected. But it was real. He carefully squeezed the doll in his hands. Thank you, May. This is the best gift I've received in a long time. The girl smiled. And then, All the children suddenly started to stand up and come towards him. Someone was handing him small toys. Some people use hand-drawn pictures. Someone just took his hand, as if to make sure he was real. It was a moment he didn't expect. He came to give gifts, but left with a gift that was worth millions. Last words of advice, words that will be remembered forever. Once the gifts had been handed out, and the children had returned to their seats, Musk stood up. He looked at each of them and said, "I want you to remember one thing." The children stood frozen, waiting. "You are not victims of circumstances. You are the creators of your destiny." He paused. "Where you are now is not the end of your story. It is the beginning." Some of the children nodded, some clenched their fists, as if internally agreeing with him. "You can achieve anything if you don't stop believing in yourself." He looked at May and added, "Never let anyone tell you that you are not good enough. Because each of you is capable of great things." As he headed for the exit, the children rushed to the windows. They waved their hands at him and shouted, "Thank you, Mr. Musk. You are the best. We will also fly into space someday." Elon looked back, saw their shining faces and smiled. He knew they would remember this day. But even more, he knew that this day could change their lives. As he sat in the car and looked at the doll May had given him, he suddenly realized. This is what he works for. Not for money. Not for fame. And for the sake of the future. A future where every child, even those who have lost everything, can believe in themselves and achieve their dreams. Elon Musk looked out the window, saw the kids still waving at him, and thought, "They will change this world. I am sure of it."